This podcast is sponsored by AXA Farm Insurance. AXA offers tailored cover to fit your unique needs, whether it's public liability or protection for your family home, outbuildings or farm vehicles. Based in Athlone, the AXA Farm team of agri-specialists and regional managers work together to ensure you receive the seamless support you need. Switching to AXA is easy thanks to an innovative online service that enables you to quickly and easily find the best cover for your needs. For more information, head to AXA.ie. AXA Insurance DAC is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome to the Farming Week, the podcast brought to you by Agriland and AXA, keeping you up to date with all the latest in Irish agriculture. I'm Charles O'Donnell and I'm joined by Aisling O'Brien, Francess McDonnell and Agriland beef specialist Breifne O'Brien. But before we get stuck in, we can't really avoid mentioning the presidential election. Ireland will go to the polls tomorrow, Friday, to elect the successor to Michael D. Higgins as Uachtaráin na hÉireann. Independent candidate and former Leas Ceann Comhairle of the Dáil, Catherine Connolly, and Fine Gael candidate and former Minister Heather Humphreys are the two candidates, while Fianna Fáil candidate and former Gaelic football manager and Defence Forces officer Jim Gavin had been in the race but pulled out, making it a two-horse race, although Gavin's name will still appear on the ballot paper. Polls will open at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning and will close at 10 p.m. tomorrow night, and by the time you hear from the Farming Week podcast again, we will know the identity of Ireland's next president. But coming to the agricultural news of the week, and after the announcement last week of payments under the Basic Income Support for Sustainability, we got a similar announcement this week regarding eco-schemes. Aisling, can you take us through the details?
Yes, Charles. So as you said, following on from the ANC, BIS and CRIS advance payments, it was confirmed that this week the advance payments under the ECO scheme worth €194.5 million would commence for just under 110,000 farmers. Now, those advance payments are at a rate of 70%. That is the same as the past 2 years. And of course, the ECO scheme aims to reward farmers for undertaking actions which are beneficial to the climate, the environment, water quality and biodiversity. And the payment rate to farmers this year will be €66 per eligible hectare. Now, 93% of all of the 2025 Eco Scheme eligible applicants have been paid, in line with the department's commitment under the Farmers' Charter to pay 90% of eligible applicants. Minister for Agriculture Martin Hayden has urged any farmers with outstanding requests for documentation from the department, such as receipts for planting trees or hedges for agricultural practice 4, to return them to allow payments to issue as soon as possible. Now, advance payments under the ANC, which commenced last month, and the BIS payments, which commenced last week, are continuing as more cases are cleared for payment as well. And farmers wishing to contact the department about their eco scheme payments, or indeed any of those scheme payments, can phone the Direct Payments Help Desk, and they can also submit queries that they may have online through their Ag-Food portal as well. Now, in other scheme news this week, Charles, 3,365 farmers have applied for over 33,000 non-productive investments, or NPIs, under the Acres scheme. Now, NPIs are complementary environmental actions which are available to Acres cooperation participants in enhancing the sustainable management of their farms. Now, this year's closing date for NPI applications was last Friday, which was October 17th. And in 2024, NPI applications were submitted on behalf of 4,800 Acres farmers, which was an increase on the previous years. Now, claims may be submitted in respect of the implementation for approved NPIs following the first 2 application windows, and the department has recently confirmed that around 812 claims had been submitted to them by October 13th. And just staying with Acres and some deadlines that farmers should know about as well. The online portal for the completion of the annual declaration for the low emission slurry spreading action under Acres in respect of this year is now open. That return has to be completed on the Ag-Food portal by the 31st of October. And the annual declaration for the conservation of rare breeds under Acres can be completed for 2024 through the Acres Rare Breeds online portal through the Ag-Food system as well. And you need to make those claims no later than the 15th of November. Now, a total of just over €517 million has been paid out to date to Acres participants, and over 93% of scorecards issued for this year's scoring season have been submitted to date. And the deadline for their submission, of course, was the 31st of August, and that's to facilitate the making of advance payments next month under the Acres scheme.
Well, the announcement of eco-scheme payments is the good news, but now for the not so good news, namely the sharp declines in milk prices to dairy farmers that have been announced by processors in recent weeks. Aisling, a lot of commentary on this from the processors is fairly negative, it has to be said. So where do we stand this week?
Yes, so following on from last week's discussion here on the podcast, Charles, where we spoke about price cuts from Lakeland Dairies and Kerry Dairy Ireland, that pattern has continued unsurprisingly into this week. And Tier confirmed that it will pay farmers 42.08 cent a litre, including VAT, for September milk. That's down from 46.08 cent a litre for August milk. And John Murphy, the chair of Tier said that global milk supply and milk solids are tracking higher than expected, with continued strong growth in September and October. And he said, unfortunately, milk supply growth is outpacing demand, which has weakened. And he said price for higher protein products such as whey proteins remain firm, but there have been sharp falls in the price for butter and for cheese, two key products that are substantial drivers of milk price. Dairygold also announced this week that it was cutting its milk price for the month of September. The board reduced the September quoted milk price by 3.75 cent a litre to 41.25 cent a litre. And in their statement, Pat Clancy, the Dairygold chair, said that global dairy market prices have dramatically deteriorated in the past 2 months, with butter prices down by more than €1,600 per tonne, which is the equivalent of 23%. And cheddar prices are down by over €800 per tonne, which is the equivalent of an 18% drop. Now, he said the combined market price reductions for butter and skim milk powder and cheddar exceed the cumulative 6.75 cent a litre milk price corrections applied by Dairygold in August and September. And he said current market returns are less than 40 cent a litre. And he added that while September milk price is still above the current market returns, the board recognises that the reduction is very significant. But he said, unfortunately, futures markets are still declining for the remainder of the year, with the prices quoted for both butter and cheese for December of this year below current levels, and further milk price corrections will be required, according to him. Now, Carberry Group also announced its milk price for September this week, and they confirmed that its average price is set to fall. And if the milk price announced by Carberry is replicated across the 4 West Cork co-ops, this will result in an average milk price of 46.31 cent a litre. And a spokesperson for Carberry Group said there was ongoing weakness in the dairy markets. So, Charles, yes, unfortunately, more milk price cuts from dairy processors this week. And the Irish Creamery Milk Suppliers Association said that there's alarming differences in the milk prices being paid by co-ops for September supplies. And the chairperson of the ICMSA Dairy Committee, Noel Murphy, has questioned the disparity between prices applying across the country. He said that the ICMSA are not naive and don't expect co-ops to beat the market. And this current phase and the market is putting suppliers under real pressure, and we have to deal with that. But he said what they've much more trouble dealing with is, frankly, in his words, the very alarming differences in prices now being paid by co-ops. And the ICMSA thinks that this is becoming even more of an issue. And he said that there is almost a 5 cent a litre difference in base price for September milk supplied from top to bottom. And he said this is a staggering difference for farmers delivering essentially the same product but getting paid by different processors. And the ICMSA have estimated that over €2,000 of a difference in returns if supplying 45,000 litres in September. So quite a range across the different prices being paid by the co-ops for September milk, according to the ICMSA there as well.
And Aisling, our colleague Kaylee Simpson was speaking to members of the public in County Mayo recently on the price of milk in supermarkets and if they thought farmers were getting a fair price. What seems to be the public view on this?
Yes, Charles. So last week on the podcast, as you said, we discussed how Tesco Ireland, SuperValu, Aldi and Lidl had all reduced the price of their own brand milk on their supermarket shelves. And we spoke last week how the farm organisations were unhappy about that decision and how it may impact farmers, particularly those supplying liquid milk. Now, this week, the independent Mayo County Councillor John O'Malley told Agriland that it's not paying farmers to stay in liquid milk. And John O'Malley is also a dairy farmer, along with being a councillor. And he believes that, in his words, the supermarkets don't give two hoots about the farmer or how they have to work or how they have to produce milk. And he said there are liquid milk farmers going out of business every year. There's less and less liquid milk farmers because it's not paying them with the price of meal and the price of labour and everything else. And he said that if there's any more cuts to the price of milk by supermarkets, because they could do it again, he feels, then there would have to be some kind of a protest outside those shops, he said, to let them know what they're doing, to show them the pressure that they're putting on farmers. So as you said, our colleague on the news team, Kaylee Simpson, was out on the streets this week. She was in County Mayo to hear the views of consumers about this price cut implemented by supermarkets. And here is the opinion of one shopper.
Well, I think they shouldn't bring down the price if it's affecting the farmer.
Yes.
Only if they were making enough money, say in the shops, but not to affect the farmer.
Yes.
Because I know I come from a farming background and I know what it's like, that it's difficult.
So yeah, Charles, as you can hear there, that shopper obviously concerned about the potential impact on farmers of any price cuts implemented by supermarkets for their own brand milk. And we'll wait and see if the retailers make any further moves on that front.
Now, moving from dairy to beef, and if you've been reading Agriland this week, you'll certainly have seen that farmer shareholders of a New Zealand lamb processor have voted in favour of a deal in which Don Meats will acquire a majority share in that business. Francess, could you take us through the details of this?
Don Meats this week got the green light to acquire a 65% shareholding in the Alliance Group in New Zealand. Alliance describes itself as the country's only 100% farmer-owned red meat cooperative. According to Don Meats and the Alliance Group, this is a new strategic investment partnership, and it will also see Don invest €132 million in the New Zealand co-op. Speaking to Agriland from New Zealand this week, Niall Brown, Chief Executive of Don Meats, told us that it represents a strategic investment for the Waterford headquartered company. Brown also told us that Don Meats is at a scale now in Ireland and the UK where it can't grow much more. He said that the Alliance business is very similar to its existing operations. Obviously, it's grass-based farming, and with no language barrier and similar cultures, he said doing business in New Zealand is relatively straightforward. Brown said Don sees a lot of synergies between the dual hemisphere, and he also pointed out that some of his customers have always switched to New Zealand for that part of the season where their spring lamb is available. It appears that one of the key rationales for this joint venture is that Don Meats can offer its customers what Brown described as a year-round supply, which he believes will also allow the company to develop better relationships and more long-term partnerships. But some Irish farm organisations have voiced concerns about Don's enthusiasm for this year-round supply approach. The Irish Cattle and Sheep Farmers Association, the ICSA, has warned that every extra shipment of New Zealand lamb going into EU and UK supermarkets means tougher competition for Irish producers. According to the ICS sheep chair, Willie Shaw, there's only so much shelf space and only so much demand. And he said if Don fills that space with New Zealand lamb, when Irish farmers are selling, it will drive down prices back at home. And he claims that's the reality of the new deal. Now, we asked Brown about these concerns, and he told us that the Alliance Group is a much bigger business than just lamb. He said it's doing 500,000 cattle as well, and it's also doing 100,000 venison. So he said to focus on lamb meant that the ICSA was only looking at one part of the business. Brown also told Agriland that some farm organisations have never reached out to talk to us so that we could explain it to them. That sounds perhaps like an invitation to the ICSA. But in the meantime, he's highlighted that premium customers have always gone to what he has described as best in season, and at a particular time of year That is spring lamb in New Zealand. The Dawn Meats chief executive has said that he believes the joint venture with Alliance Group is a win-win for Irish farmers, because he said that Alliance is a very big player into Asia, China, North America and Canada, and that will allow doors to be open for Irish and British products. It's a two-way street, he said. It's expected that this new Dawn Meats Alliance joint venture will be up and running from the start of December.
Thanks, Frances. Now, since our last podcast, we've seen developments in France that threaten to disrupt the live export trade. This all revolves around lumpy skin disease. For more on this, we're going to bring in our beef specialist, Breifne O'Brien. So, Breifne, can you take us through the developments of the last week?
Yes, Charles. So the French Minister for Agriculture announced on Friday, October 17th, that a ban will be put in place on all cattle leaving mainland France in an effort to prevent lumpy skin disease, or LSD, from spreading. So this ban is expected to remain in place until November 4th. And naturally enough, when the Irish-based cattle exporters heard about this, they were concerned. I suppose it has caused some degree of hassle for the Irish-based cattle exporters, in that they are limited on the layerages they can use. So they're no longer permitted to unload cattle in layerages which are in restricted zones. The layerages around Cherbourg are still permitted to be used, so they're currently using them. And naturally enough, a lot of the cattle which would be exported from Ireland going to say key markets such as Italy at the moment would travel through France. So these cattle can still travel through France once they're not unloaded in the restricted areas related to the lumpy skin disease.
Thanks for that update, Breifne. And just while we have you, can you update us on where beef prices are at the moment? Obviously, prices remain at a fairly elevated level compared to recent years. But as of this week, how's the price landscape looking?
Yeah, again, Charles, look, it's been a great year to be reporting on beef prices. Thankfully, things have been very, very positive this year. You know, the prices, they started fairly strong in January and they continued to rise as the year went on. Now, there was a little bit of a dip there in prices in the autumn, but they've turned the corner again and they're firmly on the rise. I suppose even just starting with the weanlings there, you know, we were talking to County Wicklow's Carnew Mart's Eugene Clune, who said the most recent weanling sale there, you know, there's prices over €6 per kilo remaining available for them top quality weanlings. You know, the plainer weanlings, he said, are making from anywhere from $4.50 up to maybe $5.70 there. That's down in Carnew Mart. We only seen there on Thursday night in Ballyjames Duff Mart there, the overall champion weanling heifer was a 265 kilo heifer. She made €5,700 or $21.51 per kilo. So that's some phenomenal money, and it just shows there at that top end niche market there for them heifers. You know, there is some exceptional prices, but even, you know, the more middle of the road and, you know, better type stock going into maybe beef systems or even bulls going for export there, you know, there's still good prices there at the over €6 a kilo. I suppose then just looking at the beef prices, and they have been on the rise too over this past few weeks. I suppose factory started the week off quoting maybe $7.40 to $7.50 on the grid for bullocks, probably taking the higher end to get a lot of them cattle, and then, you know, $7.50 to $7.55 on the grid there for heifers is where they were starting the week off with quotes. But I suppose if we take and look at maybe, you know, the top prices reported there on the Agriland beef price tracker, they come in there every Wednesday from the Department of Agriculture. If we just look for last week there in the O+, 3+ steer category, the highest price recorded there is €8 per kilo. So obviously the department data doesn't specify if them cattle were Angus, if there was any Angus breed bonuses or anything like that in it, but it just shows that is being got in the O grading category, that €8 a kilo at the top of the scale, of course. So yeah, look, prices looking fairly positive. Supplies remaining tight. Factories fairly anxious for cattle. You know, Christmas kills are approaching. You know, them Christmas orders are starting to come in. So thankfully at the moment, Charles, things are looking fairly positive for beef prices right down to the weanlings and the lighter type cattle prices too.
Thanks, Breifne. We're going to return to the dairy sector now. The Irish Holstein Friesian Association, the IHFA, is considering the development of a new full-service IVF breeding facility as part of a strategy to increase genetic gain. Aisling, can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, Charles. So these proposals are contained in a document which has not been publicly circulated, but it has been seen by us here in Agriland, and it's entitled Gen Éireann. So according to this document, the IHFA has developed proposals to position the organisation within the industry. Now, Agriland believes that these proposals have sparked controversy within the organisation, which is marking its 60th anniversary this year. Now, it is understood that under these proposals, IHFA has also put forward the idea of establishing a new company, and that company would develop a nucleus herd and the IVF breeding service. However, it would still be owned and funded by the association. Now, the organisation's proposals also outline an intention to lease a farm, which could be up to 400 acres, and that farm would operate as a calf to beef unit, where technologies such as IVF, embryo transfer, genomic selection, and sex semen could be leveraged in the hopes of producing elite sires and donor females. Now, the document details that as part of this proposed strategy, in-calf heifers would be sold after calving, while empty heifers would then be sold at 20 months old, and donors would also be purchased to meet the aim of the breeding programme. Now, we understand that the IHFA has outlined that IVF could be used on the farm and resulting calves could be reared and either sold or used for the next generation of donors. And we understand that the document outlines that once the farm is operational and the nucleus herd is being bred, the company will move on to the second stage, which would be offering IVF services and lease capacity to AI companies. Now, as I said, it's understood that the document has not been publicly shared, Charles, but we do believe that over 100 signed letters from registered herd owners within IHFA have been submitted to the association requesting an extraordinary general meeting or EGM to oppose these proposals. And it's also believed that some members have discussed a vote of no confidence about this issue, but no decision has been made at this stage on that matter. Now, the IHFA said its board has supported the further development of a proposal aimed at advancing several key objectives within the IHFA strategic plan, particularly in the area of genetic gain. It said that at this point in time, many elements of the proposal remain under consideration and are not yet finalised. Now, IHFA did send a text to its members last Friday, and it did reference this outline proposal, and you can see that text on our website and app. And we do understand as well that separately, some members of IHFA have told us that they are aware that a proposal has been discussed with the National Cattle Breeding Centre, the NCBC, and the ICBF, which of course is the Irish Cattle Breeding Federation. So definitely one that we'll be keeping a close eye on here on Agriland, Charles, as it develops.
Finally this week, the European Commission has launched a strategy for generational renewal in agriculture, which will see the EU pursue a number of actions across several policy areas to get more people into agriculture. There was a good bit of detail on this, Aisling, but can you take us through the key points of what the European Commission intends to do here?
Yes, Charles. So under this strategy, the EU Commission has set a target to double the share of young farmers in Europe to 24% by 2040. So in 2020, the average age of farmers in the EU was 57, with only 12% under the age of 40. Here at home in Ireland, just 4% of farmers are under 35, while 37% are over 65, which of course poses a significant risk to the continuity of family farms. Now, the Commission has highlighted 5 areas for young farmers that it said needs action urgently. That includes access to finance, education, training and skills, land, fair standard of living in rural areas, and assistance in succession and retirement. Now, the strategy contains so-called concrete initiatives to address these concerns, and some of them may be familiar to listeners of the podcast because we obviously had the, I suppose, proposals around the next EU long-term budget during the summer, Charles, and what the next common agricultural policy might look like beyond 2027. So some of these, I suppose, initiatives that have been outlined in this strategy had been flagged maybe earlier in the summer. One of them is to introduce a starter pack for young farmers in the next CAP, which would include a lump sum of up to €300,000 to facilitate their entry and establishment in the sector. Also, they want better targeting of funds in favour of young farmers. They're going to work with the European Investment Bank to facilitate access to finance for young farmers. There's going to be a European Land Observatory established to help farmers access available land to support farm succession, informed policy, and to prevent land speculation. And there'll be land policies at a national level as well to address access barriers and to prevent what the EU Commission termed speculative acquisitions as well. And as part of the strategy too, they're looking at women in farming, and a women in farming platform would be established, which would aim to attract more women into agriculture. At the other end of the age spectrum, the document says that they want to link direct payments to a farmer's pension age by 2032, as proposed in the post-2027 cap. So that is obviously something that had been flagged before in relation to farmers in receipt of direct payments and the pension as well. And obviously the Commission trying to move away from that, and this document reiterating that. And finally, another one of the initiatives contained in this is co-funding farm relief services, which we'd heard from the Commission previously, which would help to cover the costs for farmers during illness, holidays, caregiving, and all to improve their work-life balance. Now, there has been a few reactions to this, Charles, as you can imagine. Fine Gael MEP for Ireland, Maria Walsh, said funding targets within the new strategy have to be made mandatory if young farmers are to have a hope for the future. The Midlands Northwest MEP said moving from a mandatory 3% level of funding to a non-binding 6% is welcome, but it doesn't go far enough. And she said that 6% figure has to be a binding figure. And Independent Ireland MEP Kieran Malooly welcomed the new proposals. He said they were ambitious by any standard, but he did warn the success or failure of the plan would ultimately depend on the level of funding made available to deliver it. And he said that it's striking across the EU that around 15 million hectares are farmed under lease agreements compared to just 10 million hectares farmed by owners. And he said that that imbalance clearly presents a major barrier for younger farmers seeking to enter the sector. Farm organisations also giving their reaction this week. The European Council of Young Farmers, SEJA, said that tackling generational renewal in farming will need resources alongside political support. And while it did welcome aspects of the strategy, it said its reception of this document cannot be in isolation from other recent legislative proposals, including the multi-annual financial framework, the MFF, or the long-term EU budget, because SEJA believes that the EU's executive fell short in upholding its ambition for young farmers by removing the minimum budget allocated to their instruments under that proposed long-term EU budget. Copa Cogeca, the umbrella organisation representing EU farm organisations and agricultural co-ops, said that generational renewal will only succeed if farming offers viable economic prospects, and it said that no young person will choose or remain in the farming sector unless a fair income comparable to other sectors of the economy is made available to them. So, Charles, that's where we stand at the moment on generational renewal and succession, and no doubt a lot more to come on that topic between now and the end of the year.
Well, that almost brings us to the end of the Farming Week for this week. Just before we go, there's just a handful of final updates. The final instalment of Agriland's Farm Safe, Farm Well series is now available on our website and app. This instalment examines the supports available to farm families impacted by serious injury or sudden death. That brings the Farm Safe, Farm Well series to a conclusion, and we at Agriland just want to thank all the farmers and interviewees who spoke to us on the series and for giving us their time and speaking to us about things which would have often been difficult to talk about. Secondly, Macroom Mart in County Cork is set to auction a bullock, with all proceeds of the sale going to help 13-year-old Fela O'Sullivan, who suffered very serious and life-changing injuries in a farm accident in July. The bullock has been kindly donated by Edwina Patterson and Daniel Power of Dunmanway, County Cork, and the sale will take place this week on Saturday, October 25th. You can read more about it on our website and app. Finally, summertime ends this weekend, so don't forget to change your clocks. At 2 a.m. Sunday morning, clocks will go back 1 hour to 1 a.m. So this is the one where you gain the hour of sleep rather than lose it. And that brings us to the end of the Farming Week for this week. Please don't forget to rate, review and follow the Farming Week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love if you could spare some time to give us 5 stars and share the Farming Week with anyone you think might be interested. From Aisling, Francess, Breifne and myself, enjoy the long weekend.
This podcast is sponsored by AXA Farm Insurance. AXA offers tailored cover to fit your unique needs, whether it's public liability or protection for your family home, outbuildings or farm vehicles. Based in Athlone, the AXA Farm team of agri-specialists and regional managers work together to ensure you receive the seamless support you need. Switching to AXA is easy thanks to an innovative online service that enables you to quickly and easily find the best cover for your needs. For more information, head to AXA.ie. AXA Insurance Stack is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.